I have some absolutely insane stories to go with you today. The press corps caught trying to spy on President Trump, break into Carolyn Leavitt's office. We've got Gavin Newsom lying through his teeth about growing up poor, even though he's part of one of the wealthiest families. To help me go through all of this, I have Libby Emmons. Libby, thank you for joining me again.
Sure thing, Stephen. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So Libby is a writer and also editor over at Millennial. We'll put a link to that down below. I caught you off guard with a story here. The White House has busted mainstream media journalists trying to spy on President Trump, Carolyn Leavitt, and gain access to her office so that they could possibly take photos of documents, upcoming meeting notes, sensitive material. This is crazy. Isn't President Trump one of the most accessible presidents of our lifetime?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a little crazy. Trump is always out there answering questions. Carolyn Leavit gives more press conferences, certainly than we saw in the Biden administration. And I think that if they have questions, they really should ask. Now, that being said, of course, the White House is always going to be a little cagey because it's the White House. It deals in national security and all kinds of other things. And also because, in a lot of ways, you have journalists who are specifically trying to get whatever information it is that they are not given. Everyone is pretty sure that the information they are not permitted to access is much more interesting than that which they are able to access. So I understand certainly why reporters would want more. But that being said, I don't think breaking into offices and spying on people is such a great idea. Didn't people get in trouble for that in the 70s? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, Milkgate or Kool-Aid Gate. Oh, Watergate. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think
it. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
I mean, it says right here that they had to be chased out. They were near the Oval Office and some of the other offices. They were literally leaning into the doors, trying to hear top secret meetings. They were trying to get into offices and take photos of like secret documents or better understand the upcoming meeting with Xi or Netanyahu or Putin. I mean, that to me seems a little bit crazy. And now you've got Democrats saying this isn't freedom of the press, but the press isn't free to sneak around the White House, the Oval Office. I don't know. I thought that was such a crazy story today.
Yeah, I think that is crazy. And of course, a free press is what we have. We have the freest press of any country in the entire world. But I don't think that means that journalists should be actively trying to spy on people who are in the White House, especially a White House that is pretty transparent. The other issue you run into is that you would have a reporter, let's say they did hear a snippet of something or other, they would have a lot of it out of context and they wouldn't necessarily know what it was that they were reporting. The press has had pretty free reign for years, I think, to go after and get stories. There's a lot of people with great sources who give them leaks and who give classified documents here and there. And of course, the people who are leakers have their own motivations. It's not like a whistleblower who goes out there with their name and says, hey, I'm standing on my name and I'm standing on this information. I'm taking a risk and I'm revealing this because it's unethical or something like that. But yeah, as a journalist, I understand wanting to go get the story that you are forbidden from getting. That makes a lot of sense, but I don't think that means you should break the law to do it.
Yeah, I hear you. I always want to be, breaking news, something big, but I think that's a bridge too far. We're still in this Schumer shutdown. They've been leveraging the military. They've been leveraging the SNAP program. They've been leveraging our hungry children. Going to be ignored by the first sitting president to ever make his people starve. It's been a lot, but let me show you a clip from Jesse Waters and Senator John Fetterman, where he opens up about becoming more socialistic, being disappointed. This is damaging to America, and then we'll discuss it further.
Senator, socialism might be taking over the Democratic Party. If it does, will you become a Republican?
No, well, socialism might be taking over New York City, tomorrow, but that's certainly not the future of my party. And remind people that New York City's politics are not a national model. And watch the kinds of campaigns that would encourage him to campaign with him. It's like Pennsylvania keeps people honest. We're very purple, and I know and I love a lot of people that voted for the president. And now that's like, it keeps you honest to remember that, there's two sides and you have to find a way forward. And that's really the future. And that's why I'm proud to be a part of it.
So you're agreeing with the Republicans on the shutdown. You're agreeing on Israel. You're agreeing on the woke BS. Are you close to becoming a Republican?
No, I'd be a terrible Republican, but I'll just be a very honest Democrat that's not necessarily afraid to push back against some of these views that I just don't agree with. Like, if you can't be a very unapologetically support for Israel, then that's a problem for my party. If you think it's the right thing to shut our government down for any reason, then that should be a problem too. And I believe we need to secure our border. And things were out of control under the Biden administration about the border, and now I think that's right, and that's the views that I have. And so, with this shutdown, it would be wrong if the Republicans do that. It's wrong now. We need to reopen this. And now, for me as a Democrat, 42 million Americans, the food insecure. I mean, that's at the very kind of core of the kinds of people that we really need to protect. And now every union that's attached to this shutdown. They're all calling this has to end. If we're fighting for working families, why don't we agree with them and just do this?
All right. He said a lot there. Let's unpack this a little bit. Let's start with, is he correct that New York Democrat Party is very different than the Democrat Party of the rest of the country? Or is he maybe in a box there in Pennsylvania?
I think that's pretty hopeful thinking on his part. I think he's wrong. I think the Democratic Socialists of America have successfully infiltrated the Democratic Party, and I think they're pretty much taking over. Mamdani is just the most visible element of that. You also have DSA candidates running in Jersey City, in Minneapolis. You have them running in Seattle, and I'm sure that there are a handful of other places as well. I haven't looked into it fully, but these activists are involved in Democratic politics, and they are involved in the grassroots. This is a guy, Mamdani, who got backing from AOC, right? She's a congressman. She's a very popular congresswoman, and he has her support. She's a member of the DSA. Bernie Sanders also supports Mamdani. Hakeem Jeffries, a New York City congressman as well, has backed Jeffries. Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, backs Jeffries. And you have a bunch of other ones as well. Even Barack Obama gave Jeffries a call. Now, a lot has been made of Obama not having endorsed Mamdani, but the fact is Obama doesn't tend to endorse mayoral candidates. I don't think that he has. So the phone call is pretty significant when you look at it in those terms. The DSA has been very vocal about getting their hooks into the Democratic Party, and their goal, of course, is to get rid of the Democratic Party once they are fully entrenched. You have Islamic extremist activists. You have all kinds of people who have been backing the DSA for their own means to do exactly the kinds of things that Fetterman would oppose. These are activists who hate Israel and would be happy to see the destruction of that nation. These are activists who went out and marched around on October 8th, 2023, supporting the terror attack on Israel. These are people who, will side with Mamdani when he says that the real victims of 9/11 were women in hijabs on the New York City subway, which is absolutely insane. You know what I'm saying? So you have a lot of this across the country. These are people who were out in force with BLM and the other movements we've seen over the past few years. They are fully entrenched with the climate agenda and the high minimum wage stuff, free rent, free services, and all of these things, and all of the tax the rich and whatnot, without any concern for anyone providing jobs. And the reason for that is because the Democratic Socialists of America would be happy if no one had jobs, if everybody was on the government dole, and if everyone was getting government services, because that's a population you can control.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Senator Fetterman saying voters want to reopen, all the Democrat unions want to reopen, it's only leadership that doesn't want to reopen? Do you think there's a lot of leaders in the Democrat Party that are just terrified of being, for lack of a better word, primaried or ousted if they don't go with the flow of what everyone else is saying, which is shut it down, humiliate Trump, call him a king, say he's starving children? Are they just afraid to break from the group, from the pack?
I think to a certain extent that's true. And I also think they're very out of touch, right? I mean, these are people who, they don't always have to go home and talk to their constituents. And you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has made noise about potentially primarying Chuck Schumer. And I think she's got a really good shot. She's very popular. She's a talented politician, and people seem to like her, even though they don't, a lot of times you don't really like her policies, but people like her personally, is what it looks like to me. And also, you have a lot of people in her district who voted for her and voted for Trump, which is something that she found particularly confusing. But yeah, leadership doesn't want to give Trump this win. But what they don't realize is that it's not a Trump win, it's a basic thing. Passing a continuing resolution is something that they have all done countless times during their careers in Congress. And it's something they should probably do now. I was watching the White House press conference earlier today with Caroline Leavit, and she was saying that she had heard, so this is hearsay, take it for what you will, but she had heard that a staffer for a lawmaker in Congress, a Democratic lawmaker, had said that they wouldn't open the government until planes started falling out of the sky. And we already see concerns about the problems with air traffic controllers working extra jobs because they're not getting paid, and they're still out there directing our air traffic. There could be a stop next week. There could be like a air travel stop next week. There was talk about that I heard today as well. And that's incredibly dangerous to bring the government to a standstill. And the thing about what the Democrats are demanding is they are demanding an extension of health insurance subsidies for people who are on the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. But what they're not telling you is that these subsidies were enacted under COVID. They were part of the American Rescue Plan from Joe Biden. And it was part of their whole massive, trillions of dollars in COVID relief plan that everyone needed at the time, because everybody was shutting down their businesses and nobody was getting paid, right? And people needed their health care because we had this pandemic. So they were enacted in 2020. And then when they pushed through that massive green climate bill, the what was it called, the Inflation Reduction Act,
Yeah.
these subsidies were extended to 2025, and so now they are up again. The subsidies also, what that did was it obliterated the income cap for people who are getting subsidies, people on Obamacare getting subsidies. There's no longer the same kind of income cap as there was, saying like, oh, you make perfectly good amount of money, you can afford to pay your premium. That income cap got wiped out. So I think what you had was an additional like 14 million people signed up for the ACA because of these tax subsidies that made it so much cheaper than perhaps private plans or, buying insurance through their employer or whatever else they were able to access. So I think it's unreasonable to insist that these subsidies be extended without taking a closer look at it. And that closer look needs to include how many people who are on this plan are illegal immigrants, because we know that that's something that's happening for sure. That's something that's happening with the SNAP benefits as well. The Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins came out and said that just the other day, and 21 states refused to turn in information about how many illegal immigrants are on their SNAP rolls. So I think these things need to be looked at. And when you hear the Democrats complaining about everybody's going to lose their health insurance, they're not showing you the full picture. And there's also something else, which is, why are medical costs rising so much? It kind of reminds me of college tuition, right? So college tuition, the more government gives you money to pay your college tuition, the more those universities suck that money from you and the government. Why is the health insurance system this expensive? Perhaps it's because there's too many people on it who should not be on it, or perhaps there's something else going on. And I think that needs to be examined before we just throw more of our hard-earned money at this problem.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Anything the government touches becomes more expensive, right? So, like a very basic example is they find out they're paying $50 for a hammer that costs $5, right? Why are we now paying $25,000 for a piece of crap insurance policy with a $10,000 deductible? And if you don't get it, they penalize you. It became a tax. So it's
Yes.
forced upon you, unless you're in like a Christian care network or a Muslim care network or something like that. But I find it very hypocritical of the Democrats, where Republicans under Biden gave them, I think, 13 or 14 clean resolutions.
Mhm.
They didn't shut down the government. Trump gets in. What do? Let's humiliate the guy, immediately shut it down. They blame it on the Republicans. And then they say, we just want to make one attachment, just a simple $1.5 trillion attachment. Where's that money going to come from? The government just went broke, and they're
Yeah.
saying we need to add another 1.5 trillion. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they don't care where that money comes from. They just don't seem to care if the entire country goes bankrupt or if people who have jobs end up paying a lot more in federal taxes. That's not something that they're worried about, because it's not something that they're going to end up getting blamed for when they vote it in, right? I mean, that would be like they would just blame the president for that again. And this is actually not something that the president caused. And he's even said, hey, like, as soon as you pass the CR, and then we'll talk about the health insurance thing, let's talk about it and see what happens. But they're not interested in that. And I think that it's really true that they are more interested in making sure that people who should not be getting these benefits because they're not eligible for them continue to get them, rather than to clean it up and make sure that the taxpayers, people who have jobs, who work really hard and are out there, sending their money to Washington every 2 weeks, they're not concerned with the rest of us getting fleeced. And I think that it makes sense when Trump says that it's time to eliminate the filibuster. For sure, the Democrats will get back in office and make a mess of everything, but that's literally going to happen anyway. So I think the Republicans should take advantage of that opportunity. I think Majority Leader Thune should take advantage of that, and they should get that government back open.
Yeah, I agree. You're a very intelligent person. Let me throw this out to you. So for like over 20 years, Democrats ran on Republicans are making your health, your prescription medication more expensive. We will get that down. Trump comes in, not Biden, not Obama, and literally just sledgehammer pounds that in. And now he's forcing big pharma to bring those prices down. So who do you think really wants to make health insurance more affordable when we reopen? Donald Trump, who would look like a hero, or Democrats who are literally fighting to extract more money out of taxpayers?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. And I think that the president has done a pretty good job of trying to get those costs down. I think there's also a case to be made that a lot of the politicians are in the pocket of big pharma and these health insurance companies. These health insurance companies that give political donations and whatever else. And I think that should probably be looked at as well. I think that we also have a situation where a lot of people get medical care and then they don't have to pay for it. And that increases the cost for everyone else. But also these providers, the big hospitals and the insurance companies, they're the ones who set these prices. And how many people have gone into the emergency room because they're freaked out that something bad happened to them and, they're going to be injured, break an arm, your kid is hurt, something like that. You go in, you say, do whatever's necessary, do the test, wrap the arm, do the x-ray, check the MRI, whatever it is. And you have absolutely no idea how much that is going to cost. And even when you go into a doctor's office and you make an appointment, just something regular, and you say, okay, how much is this? And they say, okay, this is your copay, and you pay your copay. And then a couple of weeks later, you get a bill for like $500. And you're like, what is this? I thought I paid. What's going on here? It's so obtuse and hard to understand, the entire medical system. You never have any idea how much you're going to pay. You never have any idea what half the things on the insurance form even mean. Like there's a deductible and there's a copay and there's a co-insurance and then there's a cap and then there's an out of pocket. Like just tell me how much the thing costs. and tell me how much my insurance covers by percentage so we can figure out if we're going to do this or if we're just going to go get a Band-Aid. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people should have a right to know how much the medical care costs, from prescription drugs to an Advil when you're in the emergency room that ends up being $150 to anything else. And I don't think it's reasonable for us to just be continuously asked to fork over more money for other people's insurance when we don't even know how to figure out our own. You know, I mean, maybe that doesn't sound particularly compassionate, but I've been hit with medical bills, and you're like, but you know, I stubbed my toe. What's going
Yeah.
on?
I just had two big ones that I'll share. So I had to get an MRI on my lower spine and my pelvic area. And I went in there and they said, oh, your copay will be $1,300. I said, $1,300? Is the insurance going to cover that? And they said, yeah, they'll cover the difference. And I said, oh, I was just curious because I don't have health insurance. And they said, oh, you're paying cash? And I said, yeah. And they said, oh, that'll be $600.
What is that
So
about? What is that about?
because I don't have health insurance, they literally cut it by more than 50%. And then my
Right.
wife had to get on some anti-nausea medication after going to Instacare on Sunday night. And we went to Walgreens and they wanted $135 for 18 pills. I said, $135? That's crazy. Like, I don't even have insurance. How am I supposed to pay for that? And they said, oh, you don't have insurance. Let me run a coupon. $25. $25 to save me $110. Save me $700 by not having insurance to get an MRI on my back. Unbelievable.
Well, I'll tell you, I do have insurance, and I went to the emergency room for something. I don't remember what it was, like a month or two ago, and it was a $250 copay. And then they sent me a bill for like something else, and I was like, "What is this?" And the next time I needed something, I went to like urgent care, and it was like $80. It was like the same. It was like the same. I just keep getting this cold, and it was like the same thing. I was like, "I need a little antibiotic for this,"
Yeah,
and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, why? What is this disparity? It's like you can pay you you never know what you're going to pay, and you could pay $10 for one thing like you're saying, or $185 for the exact same thing. Why is there absolutely no transparency here? And why doesn't Congress care about that?
Because they don't have Obamacare. They don't have the same insurance as we do. Okay, let me switch gears. I want to share some good Trump news with you and the audience. This is from the White House press secretary. Let's watch it and then we'll react to it.
Optimistic that the Supreme Court is going to do the right thing. The importance of this case cannot be overstated. The president must have the emergency authority to utilize tariffs. Look at what President Trump has been able to do with the leverage and the power of tariffs. He's been able to sign peace deals all over the world and end global conflicts and literally save lives. He's been able to bring in trillions of dollars of investments into our country. In fact, this year alone, we are going to cut the deficit by $600 billion, namely because of the president's effective use of tariffs. And the president strongly believes that economic security is a matter of national security, and tariffs have a lot to do with that. And this case is not just about President Trump. It's about the use of this emergency authorization for tariffs for future presidents and administrations to come. And we're confident and hopeful that the Supreme Court will do the right thing. And optimistic that the Supreme Court is.
All right. So big announcements there. Trump able to use tariffs to end wars, to negotiate with people, to get trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions of dollars in commitment to build factories, bring businesses, create jobs for American citizens. And then they're going to cut the deficit by $600 billion. I don't know if they've done that since Bill Clinton. And now the Democrats are trying to block him. Some Republicans are trying to block him. Your thoughts on this, and what will the Supreme Court end up deciding?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. And I have watched, as we all have, with growing interest, Trump's use of tariffs for diplomacy in a lot of ways. When he did his whole big Middle East trip, there was a lot of talk of economic investment in the US. There was talk of, how those nations would work with the US. And I remember very distinctly, there was one moment when he was asked during a press conference with, one of the Middle East leaders about that nation's human rights abuses or human rights record. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. And Trump said, basically, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to do this other kind of deal. And we're not going to hold this nation's investment in the US hostage over human rights abuses. And on the one hand, you could say, well, shouldn't it all be a package deal? And on the other hand, you should say, well, shouldn't the United States benefit? We're going to have a relationship with this country anyway. Are we going to put sanctions on every single country that has human rights abuses, which is pretty much like every non-Western country? Like, is that what we're going to do? I don't know. And I thought that was really interesting. And it sort of made me look at Trump's economic endeavors in a slightly different way. Just recently, when he was in China and ended up lowering some of the tariff on China, that was a negotiating tactic. And that led to a more of an agreement between China and the US and potential for new kinds of trade arrangements. And you've seen it over and over again. It's something that he has in his back pocket. He can either slap a nation with it, like he's done with Canada, or he can open up trade and make things easier for that nation. And to a certain extent, I think it's good for the US to be on the world stage a little bit unpredictable. We're not going to stick to the script. We are definitely going to be outside the box when you have Trump as a leader. And I think that makes a big difference for these nations who are used to having an America that capitulates before they even get to the negotiating table. That's one of the tactics that Biden used. It's a tactic Obama used. And you can see how you would say, I'm a reasonable man, you're a reasonable man. I'm going to make these concessions before we even talk, just as a means of goodwill. But when you're sitting across the table from non-reasonable men who, as we said, sometimes have big human rights abuses, why would you think that your capitulation is going to look like anything other than weakness? And that's something that I do respect about the president. He comes in with a strong hand from the United States. And even though to a lot of Democrats, are going to look at that and say, oh, well, it makes us look like a bully. In the case of global diplomacy, I would much rather the United States be a bully than be bullied. And I think we were tired of being bullied. And if these tariffs are something that the president can use to strengthen our position globally, I think that he should do that.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is he's basically the CEO of America, and he was hired or voted in for his skill set to negotiate and keep us safe and work the levers of government to make life better for us and the world. And so it's not like as the CEO, he's trying to spend $14 trillion and the board doesn't approve. He's gone out and made a deal that will bring in $14 trillion. And they're saying, we don't know if we want the money. We don't know if we want to make America rich. We don't know if we want to be the global superpower anymore. We don't know if we want our dollar to remain superior. Like, to me, it just makes no sense. I get that he shouldn't be able to just go spend recklessly, but to do deals that bring money flowing in and countries were lining up to do business with us. I mean, what Donald Trump figured out is one of the most powerful things on planet Earth is the collective spending power of the American people. And he's using that to our advantage to make us wealthy, to bring down the price of gas, to bring war, to bring hostages back home. So for me, I don't understand why Congress is kicking against the pricks. Is it just because he's Donald Trump and they have to?
I think that has something to do with it. There's a certain element of the American population that has made hating Trump part of their personality, and they're not really willing to let that go. I don't think that makes any sense. When Trump first came into office in 2017, I thought, okay, I didn't vote for the president, but now he's the president, so I hope that he does well. Let's see what happens. When Biden came into office in 2021, I thought, okay, well, I didn't vote for the president, but let's see what he puts into effect and see what happens. And I've been much happier with the Trump administration, both first term and second term, than I was with the Biden administration, for sure. I think that there's definitely problems in this country. I think there's definitely things that are, need to be sorted out. Some of my colleagues and I recently were complaining about the increase in grocery prices. That's a thing. You see that it's on your debit card every time you go to the market and you pick up. I was just joking with a friend of mine about how I picked up a steak at the market the other day, and I looked at the price and I did put it back. I did, it was $45 and I put it back. I thought I'll eat out for this money, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely problems, but if what we're trying to do as, if what the government is trying to do is position the United States on the global stage to be powerful, I'd rather we be powerful than someone else. I'd rather we be the bully than be bullied. I'd rather that we are the nation that people want to invest in instead of some other nation. And for too long, we've felt like our nation is in decline. And, like you and like so many, I love this country and I want it to do well. I want it to be a place where my son can thrive, where his friends can thrive. And I think that, and I hope that Trump is the person who can make that happen. I don't think keeping the government shut down is doing that. And we were just talking a minute ago, where did the Democrats want to get all of this money? But they're also against the tariffs. So they're in favor of spending money. They're not in favor of making money. And they're somehow in favor of depriving people of government, government support. So I find it all very bizarre. I also think it's interesting, just looking at it. I was raised in New England, sort of a little bit of a puritanical place when you think about it, very like hard work oriented and don't depend on anybody and all of this kind of stuff. And when you look at some of the videos that are coming out of people who are losing their food benefits, which I think is really a tragic thing, you start to realize that the party that has pushed people onto government benefits and claimed to be helping them is also the party that is now starving them. And if you're relying on the government for your food, then you also have to admit that the government is the one in charge of whether or not you eat. And that's certainly not a position that I think Americans should willfully walk into.
Yeah. Oh, you make a great point. The first time I had that aha moment was when they started saying, well, maybe we won't give people their stimulus check unless they get the Pfizer shot. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. I've got to have an experimental drug that people are dying from, getting turbo cancer from, getting sick from, if nothing else, getting COVID still.
Mhm.
Like, I got to inject that into my body to get a check. Like, why don't you keep your check? I don't need the
Keep your
government.
check.
Yeah, keep your check, and they're holding a lot of people hostage, and it's pretty disgusting. Okay, you wrote an article about the hypocrisy of Gavin Newsom. So on the one hand, from his mouth, he says, I'm not running for president. I don't even know if I would want that. From his behavior, everything he's doing is gearing up to run for president, right? And then just recently, he started putting out these stories like he grew up poor, that his parents were never around, that the TV was his babysitter, that he was raised on white Wonder Bread. Like, I don't know. This is kind of starting to remind me of Hillary Clinton pulling out hot sauce so that she could relate to black voters. Like, I don't know. Like, why is he trying to position himself as he grew up a poor white boy when in reality he grew up in one of the wealthiest families in America?
It is super weird. The interview you're talking about, he was on, I forget what it's called, All the Smoke. I think it's called All the Smoke, and it's with two former Golden State Warriors NBA players. And he also was doing sort of this code switching. He was like sort of trying to sound hood on the podcast. And you're like, what are you doing? You're not Jasmine Crockett over here. What do you, she can sort of pull that off. You sort of, you can't. But he was talking to him about how he grew up poor, how his parents were divorced early and he was living in San Francisco, and that it was his mother was working a few different jobs and that she wanted a better life for him. So she moved him to Marin County. Now, Marin County is I think it's the third, maybe, is it the third? It's like definitely the 8th richest county in the country, after 3 in around Washington, D.C., which are, of course, exuberantly wealthy. And it's like the 3rd richest county in California. It might be the 2nd. I don't remember exactly. I was looking at this a few weeks ago or whenever it was. Time has no meaning in the news. But anyway, so he grew up in Marin County. He went to a nice public school there. He played sports. His dad was the attorney for the Getty Trust, which, you know, the Getty Museum in LA. It's a hugely influential California rich family. And the reason that he and his mom didn't have a lot of money when he was young, in addition to the divorce, was that his dad had blown all his money on a Senate campaign. So it took him a while to regain his wealth. And Newsom was talking about, you know, all of this stuff, sitting in front of the TV, eating Wonder Bread and growing up poor, when, yeah, as you say, it's one of the wealthy families of California, affiliated with even more wealthy families, related by blood to, not by blood, by marriage to Nancy Pelosi and a lot of other really influential people in that state. And I just don't think that the American people are going to buy it. This is a guy who sends his kids to private school, who did not pull his kids out of school during COVID. Just as he shut down the public schools across California, his kids kept going to school. This is a guy who went to French Laundry while ordering Californians to not leave their house without a mask, telling them they could only leave to walk their dogs and they had to go back home. And he's out there celebrating at one of the finest, most expensive restaurants in the entire country with his donors, you know, talking about whatever it is they talk about. Too bad there wasn't one of those journalists with their ear to the door over there, you know, that would have been helpful. And so this is a guy who has been rumored to be wanting to make a run for president. I think it's pretty obvious he wants to make a run for president. His podcast, where he started out bringing on conservatives to try and, you know, cross the divide and unify and get conservatives to like him. He had Charlie Kirk on, of course, I think was the inaugural guest. He had Steve Bannon. Maybe he wasn't the inaugural, but he's the one I remember the most. He had Steve Bannon on, and he's had other conservatives on, and he tries to play all nice. And then as soon as he gets on the cameras of the Democratic Party or the other side, he lets loose about how terrible everyone is and how everyone's a fascist and a horrible Nazi. He's just a total turncoat. And when he was asked in his recent interview about his plans to, if he wanted to run for president, he said no. He said no, that he did not want to be president. And then he had the gall to say that the thing he really dislikes is when politicians sit there and lie to you. And it's
Yeah.
like, dude, you are a liar, dude. You are sitting here lying. Your weird, creepy snake face is lying. He's the worst guy ever, right? He's just terrible. And I think that we might see Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris vying for the top of the 2028 Democratic Party ticket, running against who, like Vance and Rubio? I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. But I really, really hope that this guy does not manage to court the American people into, you know, this snake oil salesman, fake smile thing that he's got going on. His whole thing right now, this Prop 50, his plan is to, this is on the ballot in California, and it says that the legislature can bypass the California state constitutional amendment requiring an independent redistricting commission and redistrict themselves just this one time, to disenfranchise the entire Republican voter base of in California of their representation in Congress.
Yeah. And it's not like he's doing it to Trump. He's doing it to the citizens of California, the
That's right.
taxpayers, the workers, you know, but they just continue to get shafted. I mean, they vote over 40% Republican, but they don't have 40% representation. Hopefully they wake up and they start taking that back. Libby, you're always great to speak with and go over these big news stories. If people want to follow you online, where can I point them towards?
You can come find me on Twitter at Libby Emmons, and you can check out what we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com every day. Thanks.
Okay, I'll put those down below. Thanks for coming on. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Stephen.